Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 26 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is leopard soup. I call this leopard soup because the rich orangish color of the soup, dotted with black balsamic vinegar, reminds me of a leopard's stunning coat. Making this beautiful soup teaches the basic techniques of making any soup, and we'll be making several soups in this course. Soups are a great way to integrate a vegetable into a meal without it seeming like a second thought. Of course, we're using a fruit here, not a vegetable, but the principle and the technique are the same. This soup is best served cold and as a mystery. Make your guests guess the main ingredient. Almost no one can, but everyone loves it. And don't be concerned, no real leopards were harmed in the making of this soup. Techniques today are chopping, sweating, reducing, deglazing, seasoning, pureeing, straining, adjusting seasoning, finishing, garnishing, and a technique that I call garnishing from on high. So let's start cooking. All right, let's talk about the mise for lesson 26, which is leopard soup. We're going to need some olive oil. That's going to be for cooking the mirepoix. I'll tell you about mirepoix in a second. We'll need about a half a cup of chopped shallots. We'll also need about a cup and a half of chopped celery. These two together are called mirepoix in French cooking. Mirepoix may also include carrots and garlic. We're not going to be using those today, just the shallots and the celery. You'll also need to have about a cup of dry white wine. You could also use dry vermouth. We'll need to have the cantaloupe with the rind removed, all the seeds removed. Chop it up into chunks and keep the juice too. So the cantaloupe and the juice without the rind, without the seeds. We'll also need about 8 ounces of lump crab meat. Now this is more than 8 ounces, so I'm leaving it in the can until I'm ready to use it. We're only going to need about 8 ounces for this preparation. We'll need the juice of 1 lime, fresh juice of 1 lime. We'll also need to have about 1 tablespoon of chopped fresh mint, and we'll need to have, as always, kosher salt, and also a peppermill with fresh ground pepper. We'll also need to have some ground white pepper. And then finally we'll need to have a decent balsamic vinegar, and it shouldn't be too watery. It should be a little bit on the thicker side. All right, that's all of our ingredients. Right now, come back and show you the equipment for lesson 26. All right, the equipment that we'll need for lesson 26 is a cutting board, and we'll also need a chef's knife for cutting the mirepoix. We will need to have a juicer to juice that lime that we'll use with the crab meat later on. We'll need to have a decent sized saucepan to cook the soup in. Now look at how much mirepoix you have, and look at how much cantaloupe you have, and decide how big a saucepan you need to use. We're also going to need to have a blender. I'm going to be using the Ninja blender. We'll also need to have a strainer and a wooden spoon and a rubber spatula. We're going to be pushing the soup through this strainer, and sometimes it works better with a spatula, sometimes with a wooden spoon. We'll also need to have a bowl for mixing the crab meat. We'll need to have a ladle for ladling the soup into the bowls at the time of service, and then we'll need to have bowls to serve the soup. Okay, that's all of our equipment. We'll break now, come back, and start cooking. Now the first step on our prep list is to sweat the mirepoix, which in this case is shallots and celery. We're going to put a little bit of olive oil into the saucepan. How much? Enough so that you can pretty much coat the mirepoix once it's stirred around. Okay. Adding the celery. I want to turn on the heat to medium and stir everything around. Now this step is called sweating the mirepoix. Sweating means to remove excess moisture. It's going to make the mirepoix translucent when it's done. Okay, so you'll start to see steam come off of it as it starts to sweat. It's sweating off the steam, and then when the steam pretty much stops, well, the sweating's pretty much done. Now we're also going to salt this mirepoix just a little bit. I'm not going to pepper it because we're going to be peppering later on with the white pepper. We're not going to be using black pepper because we don't want to leave black specks in the soup. So if you notice that the mirepoix is starting to get yellow or brown, reduce the heat. You don't want any brown. We just want it to be clear and, or not clear, but translucent mirepoix. Okay, so our vegetables are now translucent. We're going to do now what we call deglaze, and that means to add a liquid. Now in this case, we're adding white wine. We're going to let that reduce, okay, till about, about 3/4 of that liquid is gone. What that does is it concentrates the flavor. It burns off any alcohol, if there's any alcohol in the liquid that you're using to deglaze. So let it boil, let it evaporate, let it reduce until there's only about 1/4 of a cup of the liquid left. All right, we've reduced the liquid by about 3/4. Now we're going to add the cantaloupe. Now, if you don't have enough juice from when you cut up the cantaloupe to essentially cover the cantaloupe, you want to add enough water just so that the cantaloupe is covered, just covered. Then we're going to add some salt. And we're going to add a little bit of white pepper. Now, don't use too much of this. It's strong. It goes a long way. Stir that up. And we're going to cook on medium heat for about 10 to 15 minutes until the cantaloupe is nice and tender. All right, so we sweated the mirepoix and seasoned it. We deglazed with white wine and we reduced it. We added the cantaloupe, salt, and white pepper. We cooked it for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now it's time to puree and strain it. So we're going to put the soup into the blender. Put the top on the blender. Now when you're pureeing anything, especially things that are hot, it's a good idea to put a towel over the top because the pressure can cause the top to blow and you don't want it going everywhere, and you especially don't want to be burning yourself. Now what I'll usually do is turn it off after it's been blending for a little while, let it settle, and then start again. I've gone through the slow, medium, and fast speeds. See how it looks. We want to make sure that it's liquefied. Oh, that's good. That looks really good and liquefied. All right, next step is to puree. I'm sorry, we've already pureed. Next step is to strain the soup. We're going to strain it into a clean saucepan or the saucepan that you used if you've cleaned it out. And if you've pureed it enough, that will be simple. You just pour it through the strainer. I'm going to use the spatula and just swirl it around, pressing it down into the bottom of the strainer and swirling it around, and that presses the soup through the strainer. Now I will usually then rinse off the spatula and get as much of the soup off the bottom of the strainer as I can. Why do I rinse it off? So that I don't get any of the chunkiness that was in the strainer. Okay, next thing to do is to adjust the seasoning. So let's see how it tastes. I think it needs a little bit more salt. But I'm not going to be adding any more of the white pepper to it. I can just barely taste that white pepper. I don't want it to become a spicy soup. Of course, you can make it spicy if you like to, but I think this soup is good if it's where the taste of the cantaloupe really comes through. All right, next thing to do is to chill this, and we need to chill it till it's cold because we're going to serve it cold. So it really depends upon your refrigerator and how much you made and all that, but I'm figuring this is probably going to take about an hour to get it adequately chilled. So I'm going to put it in the fridge now. I'll come back later and we will be ready to finish and plate up the soup. So I've gotten out what I'd say is probably about a cup, maybe a little less than a cup of the lump crab meat. We're going to mix in some of the lime juice. You have to kind of use your judgment. We don't want it to be soupy. We just want to have enough that it gets absorbed by the crab. Then we want to sprinkle it with a little salt, and then a couple grinds of pepper. And then we want to gently mix it together. We don't want to break up the crab any more than we have to. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's time to plate up the leopard soup. Look at this beautiful color in the soup here. We're going to ladle a little bit into the bowl. Then we want to put a little mound of crab meat right in the center. Then we want to do something that I call garnishing from on high. This is the mint. We're going to hold it about 18 inches above the bowl and let it kind of rain down. And this causes a very nice distribution. Then finally, a couple of drops of balsamic vinegar. This creates the leopard spots. Now you want to put your thumb over the top of the bottle and you only want to let out a tiny little drop. There we go. Leopard soup. You can see photos of the final dish on my Instagram, which is Chef's Apprentice Cook Like a Pro. Next up is the duck breast master recipe. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.